Welcome. Be sure to like and subscribe for more scary stories, or I will come for you. I'd like to thank Caden Brower and Bree Bolton for rejoining the Curator's Disciples. Two long-time listeners, thank you so very much for your viewership. If anyone would like early access to my latest stories and an ad-free listening experience, consider becoming one of the Curator's Disciples. The link is in the description below. Without further ado, today's story, The Limbless Doctrine by the Curator. I never thought I'd post something like this. I've lurked on here for years, read those stories about cursed websites and backrooms, all that kind of crap. Most of it felt like creative writing, something you read to get a jolt before bed. But this isn't that. I need to talk. I need to get this out somewhere before it gets me too. If you're reading this, then maybe there's still time to pull back. Or maybe you're already in too deep, like I was. My name's Darren Wu. I'm 35. I work in cybersecurity. Freelance, mostly. I've been contracting for a threat assessment firm out of Virginia since 2020, doing deep web monitoring, penetration testing, breach response, the usual ghost in the machine stuff. Clean profile, remote only, paid in crypto. Nothing that ever sets off alarms. But this isn't about my job. This is about what I saw, what I found, and what I think is coming for me now. Let me start at the beginning. My mom defected from China in 1992. She was a translator for the Ministry of State Security back then. Mandarin, Cantonese, Russian, English. Real polyglot genius. She was the kind of person who could listen to a broadcast once and recite it back in another language, like she was reading a script. One day she just vanished, walked out of a secure compound during a routine interagency meeting, and 3 weeks later, she showed up in the States with nothing but a satchel full of microfilm, a silver tooth in her mouth, and an infant me. She wouldn't talk about what happened. All I knew growing up was that I wasn't allowed to say my real last name in public. She told everyone it was Walker, not Wu. I didn't ask questions back then. I just did what she said, always. She taught me Mandarin every night after school. Had me reading old people's daily articles out loud by the time I was 9. When I made mistakes, she'd correct me without looking up, like she had every sentence memorized. She was strict as hell, paranoid. We never had internet in the house until I was in high school. And even then, she'd unplug the router if she caught me browsing anything in Chinese. I once downloaded a Taiwanese pop song, and she wiped the entire hard drive clean with BleachBit. She said the party never forgets. When I was 23, she went back, said her cousin was dying in Guangzhou, said it was time to make peace with the past. She looked strange saying that, like she didn't believe the words herself. She kissed my forehead at the airport and said she'd be back in 2 weeks. She never came back. I filed a missing persons report, called embassies, tried everything. Eventually, the consulate in San Francisco told me she was listed as no name. A ghost. No passport, no death certificate, no public record. Just gone. I've spent the last 12 years trying to find out what happened. It started with the dark web, not the onion-layered Silk Road stuff most people hear about. There's a subnetwork most don't know exists called Red Earth. It's only accessible through a Chinese mirror of I2P and some seriously obscure deprecated routing protocols, X25 tunneling, customized mixnets, things that were already ancient in the early 2000s. I found it through an IRC forum in 2014 after a Ukrainian NetSec guy dropped a hint during a late-night chat. Said it was where ideology goes to die. What I saw on there's a whole section dedicated to leaked internal documents from the CCP. Internal bulletins, disciplinary records, stuff that was never supposed to leave Zhongnan High. I started saving everything I could. I built my own air-gapped server for archiving, encrypted everything threefold, and burned weekly backups onto physical disks I stored in a fireproof safe. And then there were the whispers. Stories about people who didn't get executed for betrayal. They got restructured. Some threads talked about underground medical sites in Hebei province. Others mentioned prison ships in the Yellow Sea outfitted like floating gulags. But the most disturbing posts were always the shortest. They don't assassinate traitors anymore. One anonymous user posted in 2018. They unmake them. At first, I thought it was just dramatic language, some poetic way of saying disappear, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. The phrasing lodged itself in my brain like a splinter. Last year, I came across a file cluster during a scan of a compromised kinetic server. It was part of a threat response engagement, mostly routine stuff, audit logs, credential sweeps, forensic snapshots. But buried deep in one directory was a nested structure encrypted 3 layers under something labeled HDZ. The metadata suggested it hadn't been accessed in over 8 years. I assumed it was junk surveillance data, something old and deprecated. But when I cracked the encryption, it wasn't logs. There was one folder, HDZ17 Live. Inside it, a single link, just a plain text stream address. No description, no metadata, no credentials. It led to a dead, silent live stream with a timestamp burned into the bottom right, Eastern Standard Time. The video quality was grainy, 480p maybe, but stable. The camera feed showed a stainless steel room. No windows, just sterile white tile, 2 surgical tables bolted to the floor, a drain grate between them, and those harsh, buzzing fluorescent lights you only ever see in morgues or forgotten operating theaters. A man was strapped to the table, shirtless, gagged, his body jerked violently in these short, twitchy bursts, like he was being electrocuted. He kept slamming the back of his head against the metal backboard, his skull leaving red smears on the brushed steel. The camera never moved. No pan, no zoom. Then the door opened. 5 people walked in. 4 wore charcoal gray surgical uniforms with blood-proof aprons. The 5th wore a black overcoat with crimson piping down both sleeves. It looked almost ceremonial, like a uniform. I couldn't see any faces. They were all wearing full-face surgical masks and black goggles, military issue. They didn't speak. They didn't look at the camera. They started the procedure. No anesthetic. No prep. No hesitation. One surgeon held the man's head down with both gloved hands. Another applied a large bone clamp to his shoulder joint with the kind of detachment you'd expect from someone fixing a car. Then the third brought out a bone saw. You could see the man's body trying to escape itself, every muscle seizing against the straps. He screamed through the gag, a wet, strangled sound that barely reached the mic. They cut his left arm off just below the shoulder. The saw chewed through bone like it was plywood. Blood sprayed across the steel in these jagged, irregular arcs, like someone slashing a paintbrush mid-stroke. They tossed the arm into a stainless bucket like it was medical waste. Then came the cauterization torch. It hissed like a snake as it ignited. The moment the tip touched his skin, his whole body arched up in a convulsion so violent, I thought he was having a seizure. The smell, I swear to God, I smelled it through my laptop. Burned meat, hot iron, and something else. Something chemical and vile, like bile and scorched hair mixed together. When they finished, they left him on the table, still gagged, still convulsing, still alive. I watched the feed for 5 hours. Didn't blink, didn't eat, couldn't look away. I just sat there, my fingers hovering above the power button, but never pressing it. Eventually, the screen cut to a different room. Same man, now in a concrete cell, dimly lit by a flickering bulb. No windows, no toilet. Just IV bags hung from wall hooks, and a cot stained yellow with what looked like dried urine and old blood. A small speaker in the corner blasted Chinese propaganda on a loop. The same phrase, again and again. Harmony must be restored. Harmony must be restored. Harmony must be restored. His head twitched with every repetition, like his brain was rejecting the words but couldn't stop hearing them. The next day, I checked the link again. Same room, same man, but this time, a fresh bandage wrapped his left stump, and in the bottom right corner, beneath the timestamp, a new line of text appeared. Next, 7 days, 14 hours. 8 days later, they came again. This time, they took his right leg. I didn't sleep for almost 2 days after watching that first procedure. I tried everything to rationalize what I'd seen, told myself it had to be staged, some kind of elaborate underground horror project, or maybe part of a darknet snuff hoax. Hell, I even ran some basic neural artifact tests to see if it might have been AI-generated deepfake footage. I wanted it to be fake. I needed it to be fake, but the angles were too precise, the lighting too consistent, the blood spatter physics, the muscle spasms, the micro-tremors in the victim's pupils, all of it screamed reality. I kept slowing the footage down, frame by frame, hunting for green screen slip-ups or clipping artifacts. There weren't any. The more I watched, the harder it became to deny what it really was. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't entertainment. It was discipline, ritualized, codified, clinical discipline. An institutional punishment designed not just to hurt, but to erase. I kept the stream up at all times, isolated, on a partition drive completely air-gapped from my main operating system. I didn't trust VPNs or containers anymore. Every 8 days, almost to the minute, they return. Same surgical uniforms, same silent room, same operating rhythm. They moved like a ballet troupe of executioners, precise, mechanical, without hesitation. Always the same sequence, left arm, right leg, right arm, left leg. 4 operations, 4 bloodlettings, no words, no anesthetic, just a camera, a captive, and that omnipresent red-striped figure standing sentinel behind the surgeons like a priest overseeing communion. He never touched the tools. He never even flinched when the saws started. He just watched. The man, specimen 17, as I would later confirm, was kept alive through the entire ordeal. That wasn't just part of the show. That was the point. Between procedures, they locked him in that same featureless concrete chamber. No clock, no daylight, just IV drips, the cot with yellowed sheets, and the ever-looping propaganda from that tinny ceiling speaker. I couldn't get it out of my head. Harmony must be restored. Harmony must be restored. Harmony must be restored. Every syllable became an echo that chased me through the day. I started documenting everything obsessively. Screen recordings, frame captures, timecode annotations. I wrote macros to scrape every pixel of metadata from the feed and pipe it into encrypted logs. I ran every image through facial recognition databases, government archives, darknet forums, even facial morphing software, in case they were using disguises. Nothing ever came back. The surgeons' faces were always obscured, partially masked, blurred by resolution grain, or angled just out of reach. But the red-striped observer, he was always visible, never front-facing, never speaking, just a shadow of authority, looming like a silent judge. After weeks of combing through packet traces, I finally found something hidden deep in the metadata of the original stream, a shadow link pointing to an ancient server cluster, long since decommissioned. It had once been owned by a telecom provider based in Shandong, quietly nationalized and folded into the state-run backbone in 2011. Most of what remained was digital detritus, old firmware updates, blank node registries, firmware deployment logs. But buried in the directories was a cluster of files labeled in fragmented English and Hanzi shorthand. That's where I found it. The phrase that kept showing up again and again, like a watermark burned into the margins of every document. Limbless Doctrine, sometimes abbreviated as LD, sometimes written as LPROT, often embedded as metadata tags or stamped in a red block font that reminded me of prison tattoos. One document stood out immediately: Philosophy of Reversal, Protocol for Internal Severance. Its translation was sloppy, clearly done by an automated system, but the core message was unmistakable. The body can exist without limbs, but the mind cannot exist without the will. That is what we amputate last. I read it 10 times, then I printed it and burned the paper. I still see the sentences in my dreams. There were dozens of PDFs, each no longer than 2 pages. Victim logs, procedural notes, even architectural diagrams of recovery cells. Most files used specimen numbers rather than names. 12 victims in total that I could verify, each one paired with a sterile summary of their so-called transgression. I memorized some. Specimen 4. Compromised bank flow integrity. Funneled 1.7 million to private family trust. Doctrine initiated Q317. Full severance expected by Q4. Specimen 8. Unauthorized data migration. Known linguistic intermediary for MOD. Violation of state voice retention policy. Doctrine applied with 9-day variation due to failed cauterization. Subject displayed resistance. Specimen 11. Externalized dissonant messaging to HK cell. Direct breach of CCP cohesion contract. No public death authorized. Memory wiped. These weren't common criminals. They weren't hackers or dissidents caught scribbling graffiti. They were internal assets, high-level functionaries, who once operated within the very machine, now disassembling them piece by piece. Their punishment wasn't just about making them suffer. It was about making them disappear without dying. 3 months into my surveillance, something changed. Specimen 17 was now fully limbless. Just a torso on the table, chest rising and falling in shallow, irregular gasps. His skin had turned a waxy yellow-gray, like he hadn't seen daylight or nutrition in weeks. His mouth was stitched shut, the thread arranged in a 5-pointed star across his lips, a grotesque parody of silence. The surgical procedures had stopped. But he was still alive. I could see it in his eyes. And then, for the first time, the camera moved. It zoomed slowly, steadily toward his face. Just a few inches. But it was deliberate, purposeful, as if they wanted me to see what came next. His eyes were twitching rapidly. I thought he was having a seizure, some kind of post-trauma spasm. But then, I caught the rhythm. Morse code. I transcribed it manually, checking and rechecking the signal across multiple playbacks. Kill, 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 kill. Over and over. A desperate, primal scream that had bypassed his own mouth and turned his own nervous system into a transmitter. I couldn't stop watching, even when nothing was happening. I kept the stream window open in the corner of my screen, running like a cursed ticker feed. It felt wrong to close it, as if doing so would somehow make me complicit. Month 4 brought a new subject. A woman this time. Early 40s, I think. Her hair had been shaved unevenly, tufts sprouting out like diseased weeds. Her skin clung to her bones. She sobbed before the first cut even touched her, the tears forming puddles in the hollows beneath her eyes. The same cycle began again. 8 days. Left arm. 8 days. Right leg. 8 days. Right arm. I saw her spirit unravel in real time. She twitched constantly, like she was trying to reject her own flesh. In her final days, just before the last scheduled cut, the feed showed her rocking violently in her cot. She wasn't trying to escape. She was trying to fracture her own skull. She slammed her head against the cot rail over and over, teeth bared behind the stitched seal of her mouth. Blood smeared down her temple, soaking the filthy sheets. Her eye was swollen shut. She didn't scream, but then she started laughing. Silent convulsions shook her chest, her shoulders, her jaw. Blood streaked her chin like war paint. Her body was breaking, and her mind was celebrating it. I shut the stream off, and that's when things started to go wrong. During a routine video consult with a longtime private client, I noticed the light on my webcam flicker on, briefly, despite the feed being off in my software. I checked the system logs. Nothing showed up. No processes were using the camera. I ran a port trace, found an inbound connection I didn't recognize, encrypted and anonymized, routed through a dead Chinese academic node. It bypassed my firewalls like they weren't even there. Then my backups began vanishing. Whole folders evaporated overnight. Not just the Doctrine files, everything. Client repositories, private research, even personal archives, like my mom's immigration documents, gone. I triple-checked my NAS array. The drives weren't just corrupted. They were wiped, partitioned to zero, like they'd never existed. I killed the connection and went completely offline for 2 weeks. Burned my laptop. Set up a fresh environment from a cold install. Full hardware scrub. I thought maybe that would be the end of it. But when I reconnected just for a moment, just to check the dark node, there was something new on my secure partition. A folder I didn't create. Welcome home, Woo. Inside were 12 PNG images. High res. No compression artifacts. The first was a floor plan of my apartment. Perfectly to scale. Every wall, every door frame, even the model number of the faucet in my kitchen sink. The second image made my stomach drop. Zone diagram recovery chamber 1. It was my bedroom, rendered in blueprint blue. Red lines outlined my mattress, the corner walls, the spot where I kept my phone charger. Annotations marked everything. IV drip placement confirmed. Vocal suppression ready. External audio loop harmony.wave. That chant, harmony must be restored. They had built a recovery chamber in my home, and it was meant for me. The images weren't just blueprints. They were instructions, each one labeled something in my apartment, reframing the ordinary as if it were part of a sterile clinical experiment. My desk was marked Observation Station B2, the bathroom, Waste Drain 1A, my bed, Recovery Zone 1, my laptop, Cognitive Capture Device. But the worst, what really turned my blood cold, was the last diagram. It wasn't a diagram at all. It was a black and white photo, a still image taken from directly above my bed. I was asleep. Same pajamas, same twisted bedsheet, same bent knee that always sticks out when I curl on my side. The timestamp read 3:14 a.m. Last night, there was no camera in my bedroom. I tore the place apart, ripped open every vent, unscrewed the smoke detector, checked the ceiling, even pried at the light fixtures. Nothing but the angle in the image. It wasn't from across the room. It was from above me. That's when it hit me. These weren't just images. They were live feeds. I booted up a forensic scanner I keep on a separate OSF paranoia protocol. It picked up a hidden background process that had been running since the night I first downloaded the Limbless files. The process had privileges I never gave. It didn't appear in Task Manager, and it didn't draw system resources like normal spyware. But it was there, and it was active, sending outbound packets every 10 seconds to a masked node cluster, routed through servers I'd never even heard of. Each packet exactly 128 kilobytes. Small enough to stay under the radar, but just large enough to carry a snapshot image of me, one every 10 seconds, for 3 weeks. I tried going to the authorities. I brought printed stills and redacted excerpts, not the actual drives. I thought maybe they'd listen if I didn't come off as completely unhinged. They didn't. One officer squinted at me and asked, "You been up for how long now?" I didn't even get to finish my explanation before they escorted me out like I was some paranoid junkie. That night, I found a new folder on my external drive. No label, no encryption, just a single file. Specimen 53, monitoring.mp4. I clicked on it. It was footage of me asleep, again. But this time, the camera wasn't positioned overhead. It was at the foot of the bed. The frame slowly zoomed in until my face filled the screen. My lips were moving, murmuring something in my sleep. I cranked the volume, ran it through Audacity, filtered out the hiss, boosted the low tones. And what I heard, harmony must be restored. Harmony must be restored. Harmony must be. I trashed the apartment again. I cut the power, pulled every battery I could find, wrapped my laptop in a Faraday bag. Thought that would be enough. It wasn't. The next day, there was a new feed. This time, on my phone. No app, no browser. Just there, waiting. When I tapped it, the screen flickered and revealed a live video feed of the hallway outside my apartment door. It was as if a camera had been placed just behind the peephole. It was real time. I tested it, waved my hand in front of the door. The motion appeared on the feed, perfectly in sync. Then the screen cut to black. Red text blinked across it. "Welcome home." After that, I stopped going to work, stopped showering, barely ate. I started sleeping with a knife beside me, though I had no idea what I thought it would actually protect me from. Every time I checked my phone, the stream came back, always centered on me. Sometimes it switched to thermal imaging. Sometimes it had a crosshair. And then, one night, I woke up to a sound I couldn't place. It wasn't the propaganda loops I'd grown used to hearing in my dreams, or the soft hum of electronics, or even distant traffic. This was something else. Metal on concrete, like a gurney being wheeled down a long hallway. I sat up. It wasn't a dream. The sound was coming from my speakers. Volume maxed out. File name harmony.wave. I yanked the power cord. The sound didn't stop. I physically tore the speakers off the wall. Still playing. It kept going until I took a hammer to the hard drive and smashed it to pieces. And then silence. The next morning, everything seemed normal. But it wasn't. There was a fresh scratch on my doorknob, tiny but clearly new, as if someone had tried to pick the lock. The hallway outside smelled like bleach, and on the floor, drawn in what looked like rust, was a symbol I recognized immediately. A circle with 3 lines slashed through its center. The same symbol I'd seen branded into the gurney restraints on the HDZ live stream. At noon, the power in the building shut off. No warning. No repair crews. No outage reports online. I ran into the hallway. Every door was closed. Not a sound. No TVs. No footsteps. No voices. Just this heavy, suffocating silence, like the whole floor had been abandoned in an instant. Then I heard it. A van door sliding open somewhere below, and footsteps. Slow, measured, deliberate, coming up the concrete stairs. Not fast, not clumsy, like someone counting each step. I backed into my apartment and locked the door behind me. Grabbed the knife, ran to the bathroom, locked that door too, climbed into the tub and waited. For what felt like hours, I sat in total stillness. Just me, my shallow breathing, and the voice in my head repeating one thought over and over. You should have stopped watching. You should have never looked deeper. And then came the knock. Just once. Bang! It echoed like a gunshot through the floor. Then, silence. I didn't move for the rest of the night. Barely blinked, barely breathed. When I finally crawled out, it was morning. The power was back. Everything looked untouched. But when I powered on my laptop, I found a new file. Not a video. A live stream. HDZ18 Live. Specimen 53. The camera showed the same surgical chamber, the same gleaming steel table. Only now, the camera was closer, and the body lying on the table. It had a scar running across the ribcage, a familiar one, from a collapsed lung surgery I had in college. That was 3 nights ago. I haven't opened the stream again. I've just been writing, telling everything exactly how it happened. No embellishments. No edits. You either believe me or you don't. But if I disappear, if this account goes dark, then remember what you read. And if your live stream ever shows up on a device you never connected, in a folder you never created, or when your webcam light turns red without warning, then you'll understand the final part of the doctrine. The part they don't publish. The part no one ever survives long enough to describe. They don't just erase you, they overwrite you. This is the Curator. I hope you've enjoyed today's scary story. Until next time.